Welcome to this explainer. Over the next 7 minutes or so, we're going to completely shift how we look at limit setting with kids to build a truly wholesome understanding of this topic. If you've ever felt guilty for just saying no, or if you're honestly just exhausted from constant negotiations, you're in the right place. We're going to unpack what setting limits actually does for a child's development. Spoiler alert, it's not about restriction at all. It's about providing the essential architecture they need to grow into confident, capable people. Let's dive right in.
So, let's start with a big question. Are boundaries just walls around a child? It's a super common misconception, right? We often picture boundaries as these harsh punishments or cold, rigid walls meant to just restrict and control kids. But what if we've got that entirely backwards? What if removing those walls actually leaves a child feeling completely lost and overwhelmed?
Okay, picture this. You're walking down a quiet suburban lane. The houses, the shops, the footpaths, they all have very visible edges. And because those edges are crystal clear, you know exactly where to walk and, just as importantly, where to stop. It makes the world entirely readable for you. Well, children need this exact same clarity to navigate their daily lives. Otherwise, they're just constantly second-guessing their environment. Think about the contrast here. In a world without boundaries, a child literally has to guess everything. What's safe? What's allowed? How far is too far? Honestly, that constant guessing is exhausting for a brain that's still developing. And you know what happens when a kid is exhausted by confusion? Yep, meltdowns. What we adults so often label as bad behavior is actually just an exhausted plea for structure. But when we bring in boundaries, we instantly cultivate safety, self-control, and deep trust.
So we kind of need to redefine what a boundary actually is in the first place. It is not just a rigid rule. It's a signal. It's a signal that tells a child, hey, this is the shape of the space you're in right now. It's an absolutely crucial communication tool that helps kids organize their minds and their bodies in a world that, let's face it, can otherwise feel incredibly chaotic and random to them.
Let's break down how this actually looks in their daily lives. Boundaries basically have 5 core jobs. They make the world predictable, they protect kids from their own sudden impulses, they teach cause and effect, they communicate care, and they build trust. See, when rules change based on our mood, which happens to the best of us, a child's brain stays on high alert. This is exactly why consistent limits calm a child down way more effectively than our repeated long-winded explanations. They aren't just hearing a rule, they're feeling a reliable pattern.
Think of it like a doorway frame. A doorway frame doesn't trap you in a room, right? No, it makes the passage out clear. Without the frame, you just have a massive, solid wall, and you'd have absolutely no idea where the exit is. Boundaries shape a child's movement in that exact same way. They safely guide a child through life, which drastically reduces all that internal tension.
Now, you might be wondering, why do they need this guidance so badly? Well, children are essentially like cars with these massive, super powerful engines. They're fueled by desire, big, sweeping emotions, and endless curiosity. But their developmental brakes are still really weak. Skills like planning, delaying gratification, and self-control, those just aren't fully formed yet. So our boundaries step in to act as their external brakes until their internal ones can catch up and grow.
And part of acting as those brakes is teaching cause and effect. But, and this is key, not as a punishment. Touching a hot cup of tea teaches consequences without a single drop of anger. The cup doesn't yell at you, it doesn't get offended, it just simply stays hot. Healthy boundaries should act just like that steady reality. They communicate, this is what happens when you cross this line. It's not about harsh revenge. It's simply the coherent structure of how the world works.
Which brings us to a really fascinating insight. Think about this. A boundary is a form of attention. It says, I am watching closely enough to protect you. I love that because we really need to reframe our thinking here. Setting limits isn't cold discipline. It's actually an incredibly active, loving form of attention. Just like a fence around a garden doesn't mean the gardener hates the plants. The fence is there to make sure the plants can actually thrive without getting trampled.
And this right here is exactly why firmness and warmth absolutely must travel together. Warmth tells the child, you matter. But the boundary tells them, I will keep you safe. If you have warmth without limits, a child feels loved, sure, but unheld, kind of just floating out there. But if you have limits without the warmth, they feel controlled rather than guided, and that's when they start to harden. Healthy development absolutely requires both of these working in perfect tandem.
To visualize this, just think of a riverbank. A riverbank doesn't shame the water for flowing, it simply directs it so it becomes a functional river, instead of, a destructive flood. We aren't trying to erase a child's big feelings. That's impossible anyway. We are just giving them a safe direction to flow. Calm boundaries simply teach a child that their emotions can be large without having to be in charge.
Okay, so I know what you might be thinking right about now.
If boundaries are so incredibly helpful, why on earth do children constantly push against them? Let's be real. It is incredibly frustrating for caregivers, and it can really quickly make you feel like your boundaries are just completely failing and backfiring on you.
But here is the thing. Pushing back is not disrespect. Actually, scratch that, it's more like a natural, vital form of exploration. Children test boundaries to see if the limit is real, to see if you, the adult, are actually consistent, and to map out just how big their world really is. When they push, it's not a sign your boundary is failing. Quite the opposite. It's usually a sign that the boundary is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Let's think about a bridge. People trust a bridge because it holds weight in the exact same way every single time you cross it. I mean, if it swayed unpredictably, no one would feel safe driving over it, right? When a child pushes your limit and you remain steady under that pressure, you are proving to them that you are that bridge. You're proving that their world, and most importantly, their safety, can be fully trusted.
So here's how this actually unfolds developmentally. First, the adult provides the external boundary and simply says, stop. The child experiences that limit, and they learn to pause. Then, as the adult stays consistent over time, the real magic happens. The child internalizes that structure. This is the exact mechanism where our external no gradually transforms into their own internal voice of self-control. The outside literally becomes the inside.
But, and this is a big but, the way we hold these limits matters immensely. When limits are unpredictable, harsh, or humiliating, the child simply learns fear. Sure, they might obey, but only because they feel unsafe. And that just creates compliance, not real growth. On the flip side, when limits are firm yet safe, the child learns structure. They might not like the limit in the moment, for sure, but they can make sense of it. And that is where real, lasting resilience is born.
Which brings us to the absolute core idea behind this entire explainer. Boundaries are not walls around a child. They are the shape that makes growth possible. It's like a tree. A tree needs a structure to reach, bend, and strengthen over time. And a child needs a shape to their world. If we hold them way too tightly, they can't grow naturally. But with zero structure, they just completely collapse. Boundaries are that essential, loving architecture they need to thrive.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final, slightly provocative thought. The next time you face resistance, and you will, instead of asking yourself, how do I make them stop, shift your perspective completely. Ask yourself, what is this boundary teaching? Because once you realize that your calm, consistent limits are actually training grounds for their future, you stop just managing bad behavior and you start actively shaping their growth. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you see the beautiful purpose behind the edges of your child's world.